I live in Moscow. Yeah, pretty much.
All right, we're back. So happy to be back. So we have a very particular friend of mine because we're really good friends online, but we had never had the chance to sit down properly and talk, and today is the day. So we have Ilya Mazaev. He is graduated of Economic Geography in Moscow State University. He worked briefly on a regional growth analysis think tank. He is co-author of one monograph and few articles on regional growth factors and convergence tests. Then, following the family bloodline, he turned to music production and graduated on Berklee Online School. And nowadays he's a really prolific and hardworking music producer, also educator, works for Moscow Music School and for Bushka Skola Art Design School. And he has worked with artists such as Mujuice, Naadia, the Black Delta Movement, and Vadim Eilenkrig, who is a jazz trumpet player, very interesting cat. So I'm very happy to have you here, bro. Welcome to the Leo Perez Show. Yay, finally we did it, man.
Yeah, good to see you online.
Yeah, so how has...
Yeah, looking good.
You were telling me the lockdown has slowed down your work a little bit because of your educating people a lot.
Yes, but it was a bit unexpected, but they offered me this thing at High School of Economics Sound and Art program to read the mixing and mastering class now, not autumn. You know, it should be September, and I'm reading it now. So I had to reschedule my mixing and mastering work, and it actually it was a bit complicated because we moved a lot of deadlines with artists. All the releases that were just due some date, they were done, but some other projects, there's a bit of a traffic jam now.
Were your clients condescendent with you, or they were not understanding the situation?
No, they understand the situation. Also, all this lockdown, you know, mixing at home, especially first 2-3 weeks was a bit tough. You know, it's different acoustic environment and making decisions based on what you hear from the speakers. Luckily, I have small speakers, so I wouldn't really imagine how I mix if I had bigger speakers.
Tell me a bit, because we're kind of like getting to know each other a bit here. Tell me a bit about your story. I mean, I look at you, I follow you online, and I hear what you do, and I really like it. I find your work really inspiring, and well, I mean, how did you got to the point where you are now? Kind of.
Thanks. Well, it was pretty random decision. I mean, I always liked music. I finished musical school when I was when I was a teenager, you know, and we played in a band at school and wrote some songs, played gigs and stuff, and all this, economics and geography education, it was like my idea of profession and something like that, but music was always there. So, and at some point I realized that probably I should switch to music because of this passion of creating records. It was an amazing experience, you know, when you recorded something and people listened to it. It's just awesome, you know. Well, it's very important not to forget that thing, you know. Yeah. When it becomes your career, so it's not like a daily routine or something. Because actually, music is for people who are not in the industry, who are just listeners. Music is something magical for them.
Yes,
it kind of adds a lot of much needed emotions to everyday life.
It's kind of like food for us.
People.
It's kind of like food for us.
Yeah.
I mean, you go and you grab a tomato. No, what I mean is that you grab a tomato from the shop and then you're like, okay, here's my tomato. I just put it on the cart. It appeared there magically. But
that's it. So I started. First thing, I recorded a single with my band, and I really liked the process in the studio, and I started learning my first thought was that I have to learn Pro Tools. I can't get away with Cubase or Logic or whatever, because most big commercial studios in the world use Pro Tools.
Yes.
And I have to know it. Otherwise, I can't take projects. I can't bring the project. I'm like chopped off that side. So I decided to learn online at Berklee. It was one of the first years of online education, and the internet was very slow. First 2 years, there were no videos.
Oh,
it
wow.
was all text. It was all text and online quizzes, tests. Audio was there, critical listening things. Like you guess a quiz, like which frequency band is cut off the spectrum of white noise or something like that. But other than that, it was like all the text and pictures, and we were chatting with professors, but it was very highly efficient. My first teacher was David France, who owner of Underground Sound Studio in Los Angeles.
That's great.
And he wrote a really good book called Producing with Pro Tools. And there was a choice, either to take the official added curriculum, design at the time, right? And get that Pro Tools 101, Pro Tools 110 official paper that I'm certified, by Avid.
Exactly.
But I looked at the curriculum, at the syllabus, and thought that, well, it's just learning the software. That's not what I want. But that Berklee was a different thing, and they just taught how to produce music using Pro Tools. And all the features, all the editing tools, all the everything, automation, it was all connected to purpose. Yeah. Why do you need it, and how to make records? That was amazing. Later on, De France wrote and produced a major hit for singer Ayoka. You know her?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Simply Falling is his song, and 25 million views, I think, something like that. Yeah, they played it 16 times a few years ago. We had beers with him. Yeah, so that was my first experience with online education, and I was very happy. Now this experience is very ususeful, because
now you're on the other side.
30.
Yeah.
What?
Now you're on the other side.
I'm on the other side, but I remember how we had like 1 hour of chat, like ICQ chat with professor, and that was something you were waiting for, and you were just exchanging messages. And
there is something kind of weird about the current situation of online education, that it's like, I don't know how you're handling this with the students, but because there is a 24-hour link kind of with them, and I think that's a little bit off in a sense. I mean, it's breaking a little bit this, as you said, like there was this moment when you were waiting for that ICQ conversation, and you were like, here it goes, and also you were focusing your information so it's channeled properly.
Yes.
But now it's like, I mean, when I started engaging with the students of Wyszka Szkoła Ekonomii as well, I even though I like to be a very open-minded and connected person, I said, okay guys, look, like maybe you should write me emails, like, and they were like, emails? How can I use that? How is that possible? I have a chat Absolutely. There, 24 hours available for you. It's just like the current modern circumstance has wonders. And I don't know how has your personal journey been, but I have kind of seen myself moving towards a little bit more in some things on the conservative side of the spectrum, because I mean, technology offers us a great, wonderful things, but there are some very old principles that we really shouldn't just throw out of the garbage. Like, for example, the relationship between a student and a professor. There has to be this sort of gradient, and these technologies tend to erase that.
I think it's I've been teaching in 4 universities by day, and it was my main thing. It's been like 7 years, I think. It's GITIS, Theatrical Academy of Arts. It's a very old-fashioned, conservative, serious high school in Moscow.
Yep.
And those people who study there, they're different from Vishka, and they're different from Moscow Music School, of course. There's 3 different categories of people, and this distance between the professor and the student is different.
Yeah, it's something. It's something that it's worth thinking. I mean, it's worth thinking that I read a quote of Carl Jung, and imagine this was said by him in the 50s. It's something like the better we are at measuring time, the less time we have. And he meant in terms of that the evolution of technologies just create the circumstance in which things get so quantized and so compressed and so that we just don't have time for ourselves or for things. And I've been shocked about this. If my friends from Caracas will meet me now and we will sit for some beers, they would be shocked about the views that I'm currently holding close. I mean, moving to Russia certainly helped me to accommodate a lot of the things that I consider truth. But not only moving to Russia, but also seeing the evolution of all of this is great. It's wonderful. But it's also scary. We all enter into this head on. We gave our lives to I mean, and our privacy. I don't even want to talk about privacy, and I don't even want to talk about it. It's a problem. It's just like, hey, we just don't know. We just went and
it's probably just normal future shock.
Yes.
People were shocked by telephones 100 years ago. They were scared to talk 100 kilometers apart. It was I can imagine. I read an article that was posted by Mark Wessel, one of my professors at Berklee. He is in music production and engineering department, and he told about why Zoom lectures are so exhausting.
Yeah,
and they are because there's no body language. You kind of, your brain feels that you're together, but your body feels that you're apart.
Yes,
and this cognitive duality, weird, it kind of wastes a lot of emotional energy. You still try, you don't see the eyes of the students, and you don't know whether they get what you say or not, or whether it's interesting for them or not. But you still have to keep going. It drains a lot. First 2 weeks were kind of complicated. Now it's fine. Now it's better. Yeah. But I agree. This Telegram feed that you wake up and it's like 600 new messages. I won't read them.
Sometimes
write me an email.
Sometimes we see, for example, an image of a monkey inside a laboratory experiencing some tests. And we look at this animal and we feel sad for the animal. We're like, oh, that's painful. And then we forget that if you would put a camera to us, maybe that's how we look when we are receiving all these messages and we're just testing all of these new ways of living. I mean, and nobody feels sorry for us because, I mean, we're the highest primate, and A, and B, well, we're just the experimenters and the ones who are experiencing the experiment. And I mean, I think, as you said, that this is most likely technology shock. And when you mentioned that, I wanted to tell you that I read a commentary. I want to say 2 things. I read a commentary. It was something of really, I think it was from the 16th century. It was a commentary of a professor describing how, maybe it was a bit further, 17th century. They were already universities. There was a professor saying, like, nowadays students have access to paper. And so this means that they have the capacity to write messages to each other during the lectures, and they cannot be focused on what I'm saying. So he was criticizing the use of paper. And the other thing is that I this is a very interesting fact. It's like the average speed of a human being, I mean, until 100 years ago, sorry, not the average, the maximum speed that a human being could travel 100 years ago was horseback. And when trains were introduced, there were all these like religious conservatives and people in introducing the idea that traveling at the speed of trains most likely will damage us, like
kill people organs. I read that. Yeah, I know that. That's what I say when people say about this new technologies and stuff like that.
We're gonna be fine. And one of my basic premises, I mean, it's certainly gonna have effects, but one of my basic premises always, by the way, you should Google this, or people should Google this. There is a theory called the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. I mean, it's a hypothesis that says that 13,000 years ago, and it's really, really well documented. And by the way, I'm extremely excited. On next week, I'm going to have one of the scientists pushing that that theory on the podcast. This is a theory that proposes that 13,000 years ago there was a comet impact that hit the North American ice cap, and there is a lot of evidence about that spread across the whole world. And the automatic meaning of this, and why I'm bringing this point to the conversation, is A, because every time I can bring this to the table, I bring it because I find it really important, and B, because we have survived, in my opinion, something of that scale. When you know the dimensions and you understand the physics of something like that, of what it means that a comet would hit the Earth. I mean, and the 1,000 years that unleashes. And then you see people freaking out about what's going on now, and that then you realize, well, look, we're resilient. Like, we're really resilient. And I know it sounds a bit arrogant, but man, think about what, especially the ancestors of Russians lived in the Second World War here. And we survived that. And I really think that we can survive Twitter.
Oh, sure. Yeah. We all tend to underestimate our adaptive skills. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, definitely. Tell me something. How was when you started this in the year? What year you started this in 2000 and what? The Berklee course. Yeah.
2007 or 8, I think.
How was you're a person who were profiling yourself to be a producer here. How was Russia back then? I would really like to talk a lot about Russia. How was Russia back then?
It was pretty cool, and the indie scene was very good at the time. A lot of bands, and they keep evolving and dissolving, but it was before this whole hip-hop thing, And there were bands like Punk TV. I really liked them. And others, they played this mixture of Manchester guitar and electronica. So it's the early 2000s indie thing, when Korg released the Micro Korg, and bands could afford a really cool synthesizer that did all that stuff. And it was really a fantastic time. And we played in a band at the same time. So I was really, really looking forward to this thing to outgrow, but it just vanished. And new music appeared. So dubstep and hip hop and Russian hip hop, and everything changed. But I'm not complaining anyhow, but it's just you can't predict what's next. So
and how was Russia more in the economic side of the spectrum? I mean, like, were you feeling that there were not necessarily like economic numbers, or how were you feeling? Like, were you feeling that there was a perspective, or that you were going to have to leave the country or something like that?
Oh, it was a mixture of feelings, I think, as always for everyone. Because on one hand, the oil price was so high those years. Russia finally covered all the debts of Soviet Union, because Russia took responsibility on all the loans that Soviet Union did back in the day, and then went bankrupt. So reserves became pretty big and stuff like that. And there was a lot of, when I was into economics, there was a lot of discussions about the importance of institutions, the importance of regional development, everything like that. But all that just, it didn't translate into anything, It was just discussions of experts. And now I understand that expert is basically a guy who is not responsible, he gives advice, he takes money, and I want to say something, especially in the context of the pandemic, is that it's responsible. It's only held responsible when he was not so conservative. So experts, if they say that the low number, then they are not punished by anybody. But if they say the high number, which may be the real one, I mean, they get punished by everybody. So yeah. Well, there's a lot of politics involved, and true. But I think that really, as an economist, you can write write an article into American Economic Review or Quarterly Journal Economics, just one, and get a Nobel Prize. Yeah. You don't have to explain everything. You have to explain something new, and that's enough for a career. And you're a professor, you write books, and stuff like that. But when you're a politician, like when you're running the country, there's military, healthcare, taxes, lobbyists, all the industries, transportation, infrastructure, international relations, and all that happens 24/7. And you can't say, "I'm sorry, I fucked up military, but look at healthcare; it's good." You have to make everything at least not too bad, And these people who are responsible, they have very different mindset. Now I understand, because at that time I remember I didn't realize that when economists talk something like, and it sounds scientifically right, but and politicians, so they don't understand each other at all.
Yes.
Now I understand the other side, that the economist doesn't understand what it is to be responsible, to be in charge, because he's not. He is like making calculations or running regressions instead, and also publications.
The economist is experiencing as well a lot of confirmation bias, and you see this very, very strongly nowadays. I see such a division between, because there are all these people sitting down at home and saying, no, we have to stay locked down, nobody should go out to work, and it's like, yeah, mister, I have a job and I get paid a salary at the end of the month, of course that we have to all stay at home. But you're totally disconnected with the fact that there are majority of people, like in the USA right now, as the dating of this episode, there were 36 million people who lost their jobs for these lockdowns. And so experts can say one thing. And also, I mean, hey, let's not forget that, I mean, by the way, I'm of course not against the fact that we locked down and that this was the correct way to go, but we have to bring some people into account that initially the first estimations were super off. I mean, and that's what I meant about the fact that experts are... When experts are off like that, they are not punished. Because, well, I mean, it's normal to exaggerate because you want to bring people to panic so people get serious. Like, for example, there was a British university, it escapes mine, it's really famous right now, a study escapes my mind right now, which was projecting 2 million deaths in the USA. It was King's College study. It was projecting 2 million deaths in the USA and 500,000 deaths in the UK. And so people make decisions based on those projections, and then the reality is totally different. And we find ourselves in a situation when perhaps we overkilled it. I mean, Sweden reacted very differently to this. I don't know how much you're informed of that.
I agree, but it's also about the uncertainty. It's like, you see the exchange rate jumps, like the dollar goes up or down, and you think, I should have exchanged money yesterday, but that thought is absolutely has nothing to deal with reality. It's about the sequence of things happening, and all these lockdown decisions. At that point, when there was no information, not enough information was going on in China, and then it starts in Iran, and then it starts in Italy, in Lombardia, and of course other countries, they had to just react fast, and overreaction is probably not a big problem.
In this case, it isn't.
Under this situation, because overcrowded hospitals, it's terrible.
The problem I see is how the 6 weeks after, which is like everybody made that sacrifice, because the people that have a regular job don't see it as a sacrifice, and it is a major sacrifice. And that's fine, and I think it's important that humanity makes sacrifices every so often. I mean, it's a part of our journey, and we do it every day. I mean, we sacrifice that Oreo cookie, so we are not going to get fat and things like that, and we sacrifice. But the problem that I'm starting to see emerging, I follow mostly American politics, because I see it like a game of SimCity, that is there running a simulation. And then I can see it from here, and it entertains me. And one of the things I see in the West cooking that really bothers me is this kind of debate, which is like, if you don't want to stay, because LA is proposing 3 months furthering of the lockdown right now, for example, and the people who are against that are seen as a right-wing capitalist speaks, and it's like, we should be able to understand each other a little bit better. We already made the effort, We're here. 6 weeks passed. Everybody stayed home. well, we're going to have to, we're going to have to give some people responsibility in their hands and not just deposit everything on the government. I recently made a poll on my Twitter page, which was like, what do you guys think? Individuals can make responsibility, can make decisions on their own or not? And overwhelmingly, everybody went and say, people don't have the capacity to make decisions on their own. That's a fair point, and I just asked the question back. So, do you consider yourself capable of making decisions on your own? Of course, and it's like, well, but that's very comfortable.
Sure.
So,
It's about like that video about greed with Milton Friedman. You've seen that?
No, super coincidentally, today I saw for my first time Milton Friedman speaking, like 20 minutes ago, but I don't know which video you mean. Yeah.
That's a funny video. He just talks about greed, and he said, "Yeah, it's always the other people who are greedy, not you."
Absolutely.
And it's like, well, the thing is, I personally think it's also about the numbers and statistics, and it's like 10% of people who make wrong decisions can ruin everything.
Yeah.
And 90% making right decisions can help with this kind of virus. So. This regulation, I have no answer because and sometimes I myself expected things to develop something like they developed, but things that the government said they were right not to shock people with long periods from the start and stuff like that, because people would be just so confused and broken,
I when I try to describe, and here we're getting into the territory that I love about the opportunities of this podcast, is just to describe how life is here. And when I was speaking with my friends, and they were trying to tell me what's going on in Russia with the coronavirus, and well, firstly, I'm sure you're going to correct a lot of the things I'm going to say. Maybe not, but I'm expecting that because I don't speak Russian, and so there is a barrier. Well, I speak Russian, but there's still a barrier between me and the internet. When I sit down and see this Cyrillic text, I just freeze a little bit. So a lot of things I miss. But I was telling to my friends something like this kind of thing. Like, look, Russia is handled by a big uncle, a big dядя, a big powerful dядя. It's like,
right.
So I mean, so he or the father of the family, the patriarch of the family, and the way he tells you the news is not the same way as an American father will tell you the news. In here things are a little bit more massaged, so the thing is presented, in a way that, because the father doesn't want you to freak out. Because let's correct that. I see you have a lot of things to say. Go ahead.
I don't know. I mean, it's. I wouldn't really. It would be like a simplification.
Sure.
Father. It's very complicated, and I mean, what I see now, it's like it's pretty. It's pretty sane, and there's no like. I don't know. I don't really want to discuss the situation with pandemics much because it's still going on.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's. I'm not an expert at all in these things.
No, sure.
To be honest, so let's talk about music production maybe. Because basically, I think that it's a very complicated topic, and
but I was interested in gathering, how do you feel as a citizen? I mean, of how information was presented to you. That's kind of where I was.
I think it was really well well given and stuff like that. Yeah, that's what I think, because basically I was looking at the situation long before this all started in Russia because of friends in UK and US and Italy also. Yeah, but that's why I was reading So it's pretty good, It's so far so good. I can't really, it's ongoing situation. Yeah, and I know that in government they're very also they worry a lot, when what to do next and stuff like that, because there's a trade-off with economics and a trade-off with potential, acceleration of the pandemics and. So it's a very hard decision,
So let's teleport ourselves immediately. this will have profound implications in the world of music. What are some meditations that have come through your mind about this, if some?
It's very hard to tell. You know, I think the last 2 decades, the importance of live shows
Yes.
in the whole income structure of music is like it grew a lot, you know, because I think in 2001 we had about $40 billion sales, and by 2014 they were like 13. So the whole world market of record sales went down a lot. And if you look at the Forbes, not this year, I don't remember, but a few years ago, I was looking at the most, not the most rich, but artists with top incomes per year, you know. And there was Madonna, there was Bruce Springsteen, and Roger Waters. 3 great world tours.
Yes.
The albums that they released that year. Roger Waters didn't release an album; it was The Wall. But 2 others, Madonna and Bruce Springsteen, they were like they were just like bottom of Billboard. They were not selling,
but they were
so
still.
All the money they got was from the tour, and the album was for these major artists like, you know, Depeche Mode, U2. I don't. My personal experience, they're not as creative as they were, because the album is just justification for a new world tour.
Yeah,
it's not that I have something to say. Maybe they do have something to say, but it's not as intense musically and creatively as they were like in the 90s. All of them, Madonna and also Depeche Mode and U2 and other bands. So it's more like a major justification for launching a big tour. Also, now that all the live shows are just shut down, all of them. And I mean, I think of people who just invested money in tours. They booked all the rental companies.
No,
what
man.
do they do now? I just, it's terrible to think, you know. But it's very complicated. So now I think that the importance of recordings might go up again. I think so, but I can't predict. You know, you can't make predictions in the economy. It's impossible.
Yeah.
But I think that people will turn to make better quality recordings. I mean, quality not about hi-fi.
Yeah.
I mean, quality like the quality of material, of music, of songs, of everything. So.
So you're expecting? Sorry, let me see if I got you right. You're expecting, for example, artists who were obtaining the revenues from tours now going back to make records, and perhaps those records will
maybe not them, maybe new artists, but overall, you know, it's not only the giant tours that closed. Clubs are also closed.
Everything, yes.
Everything is closed. So, I mean, it's time when you have like an opportunity to try and write new songs and stuff like that. Overall, you know, my point about that drastic fall in record sales in the early 2000s was that the industry somehow it kind of it wasn't that destroying, you know. It survived it. It shrank 4 times and it survived it, because record industry, it's not like it's a very different industry. The amount of projects that become profitable is about 10% of all albums ever made, you know. It was like that in the 60s, and it's like that now. And labels, they work a lot, and they can't really raise that percentage, because it's such a market, very, very unexpected, very very complicated, and you can't predict things here. So I think that musicians, they can teach music, they can do lessons, they can write scores, they can write ads, commercials. You know, the commercial budgets went up now.
Yeah, of course.
Everybody's online, and all the traffic goes up, and advertising is just booming. So that needs some music. So as long as you're an artist, you have some choices, at least, where to put your effort to probably survive this period and also look for new opportunities.
Yes, and there will be these opportunities, but I mean, it's just painful to watch, and that's all we can say. I mean, it's painful to watch in the sense that, for example, I have and you have a lot of friends who work in the live sound, especially. I mean, it's like it's heartbreaking, and I personally, I don't know, I haven't seen so much efforts from artists to kind of do something from big artists. I mean, in Russia, I haven't seen anything. I don't know, like some sort of fund for the live sound workers or something like that. I mean, I don't know if this exists. If somebody I may have missed that may have said something. I mean, but it seems like a need, right? Like to kind of chip in together.
I've seen a band in America. I don't remember whom. It's a famous band. They started. They launched selling a lot of merch.
Yeah.
And so their tour crew gets all the money.
Yeah, but
it's a nice idea, So it's not like just you get some souvenir from the band and you help support those guys. It's a good idea.
Perhaps here in some kind of hypothetical talk, I mean, perhaps this is a moment where streaming services perhaps occupy an important role. I mean, in balancing out. I'm not like a kind of like a person who will push them to change their business structure. That's their problem. But I mean, maybe the consumer is ready to pay for a higher fee for their streaming service if this may increase the revenue of artists. I mean, just talking here.
It's hard to say, because for many years radio was free.
Yeah.
I mean, it was free, and the artists didn't get money, and that worked for decades. And people, when this whole thing with MP3 started, it wasn't anything new.
Yeah,
to be
exactly.
Honest. People watched MTV for free, and all the music videos and all the stuff, and the regulation that got some copyright share to the artist from that MTV playback. It's like it wasn't big and never.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good point.
And it was good for them to be exposed on MTV because people bought their records. And now it's not. You don't have to. You don't have. It was like streaming is now both. It's like you choose what to listen to. You couldn't choose on MTV. You had to wait for Britney Spears, then Christina Aguilera, then you get Mary J. Blige, then you say, and then Green Day. Woohoo!
Yay!
We watch Green Day for 3 minutes, and then it's again. Remember that, right?
Yes.
1999 or something.
Yeah. Or watching at 2 a.m. There was this program. I don't know if in Russia you had it too. It was called in Latin America. By the way, Latin American MTV was insanely good. I mean, it was excellent. And so whatever. There was this program in the end, and the 2 a.m. or something called 120 Minutes, and it was where all the good videos were. I mean, zero bullshit, no commercial. It was amazing. And one would wait all day. Latin American MTV had this very interesting facet, because what people don't know about Latin America so much. I mean, people tend to group Latin America like one unity, and of course Latin America is a very big place.
It's very diverse.
Yeah, very diverse. And so MTV Latin America was positioned in the Mexico City, Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, and Santiago de Chile, and the whole circuit of programming across the whole day. And later it opened in Miami, but initially it was really truly Latin American, and it was a wonderful golden era period of very, very interesting stuff. It was very out there. How was MTV in Russia, by the way?
Well, it started in 1998, and it was amazing. I remember the watching how it launched, and
were you watching like, oh my god, here it comes? Like, did you watch it like?
We were expecting all. I was at the TV set, and then the first music video, there was a poll, and Mumi Troll won the poll, and the first ever music video to play on Russian MTV was Vladivostok 2000.
Cool.
Yeah, and then after that there was live concert footage from Red Square with Prodigy. And then it was that night, and then it was the first episode of Beavis and Butthead.
Wow, man!
And that was like fresh air, you know. And first years, it was amazing.
Yeah.
And music scene at that time was amazing. All those bands and artists, you know. Alternative rock wasn't that commercialized at the time, you know. It was before this Linkin Park or who'd say
Nickelback.
Yeah. Because we had bands like Incubus, 311, early Limp Bizkit. It was fine. Korn and Offspring before Pretty Fly for a White Guy. But their true stuff. You know, I was really at school. I loved all that music, and it was really sad to see it going like vanilla pop something. You know, it became a very, very well thought, constructed genre. It looked like Backstreet Boys to me.
Yes,
it was like Limp Bizkit became very, very stupid.
Do you think that there is like an eternal cycle of cool becomes popular and then it stops being cool, kind of thing, or do you understand where I'm going there? Yep.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, it's a good question. Probably yes, because once somebody sees, you remember that Frank Zappa interview, when the guy sees, it sold 1 million records.
Yes.
Yes, I want more of that.
yes.
And then they start repeating. And you know, the problem starts when you start to repeat a success that wasn't planned.
Yeah.
it was a time and place and people. And it's like, you know, Dookie by Green Day. The first, 1994, right? The first major label album. Because previous albums like Kerplunk, they were very indie and underground. And this Basket Case and Long View, these two songs, and bang. It's punk. It's still punk and it sounds true, but it's very popular.
It's so good. Sorry for just a micro interruption. It's so good what you're saying. It's like kind of like when you had a blast in a party and then you try to recreate the same circumstances. Like, okay, you sit there, you were there. I had this brand of beer. You had this thing in your hand. Let's go. Let's have fun now. And it's like it doesn't work like that, right?
Absolutely. Because it's all about searching. It's not about planning. You know.
Yeah.
Playing is just playing is important, but playing is just to keep the entropy at a good level, not too much, you know. So you know the budgets, the deadlines, but to plan, before you even went to the studio, you think this should be made on API with that microphone. With that drum kit, like for example Ludwig drum kit, and I know I'm a producer. No, you don't know. You have to set up the mics and listen what's going on and change it and search for the vibes, for the sound. Not try to just make some recipe. You know, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, and
all those major pop productions, they try to do it over and over again, like you know. Some people like Max Martin, they can repeat a lot of their success, but it's very short-term pop. It's he's got a few really good hits, but most of them we forget next year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Who do you think is an engineer that or producer that will? Of course, there are many, but what are one of your favorites? Maybe that you think if you would go to the studio with this person, the journey will be kind of different every time, or do you think that everybody finds a comfort zone and stays there?
Oh, let me think. Such producer, I don't know. Well, Phil Ramone, I think, was like that. Sadly, he passed away, but I learned on his book and on his records a lot. And it's a terrible story. I had a planned trip to New York. Sad story. I had a planned trip to New York to Frank Filipetti to mix several songs for an album.
Yep.
And he dies like a week before and I come, and Frank is absolutely heartbroken because he worked for decades with Phil, and he was his main engineer. George Michael record, Elton John, the first DVD, really good selling Rod Stewart Jazz Standards album. It had to be you. Also, and lots of other projects, and musicals for Broadway. And it was it was a very strange experience for me, because Phil Ramone was somebody I was chasing in terms of sound and music for years. And now I'm like, Frank and Ellie, they're very, they're fantastic people, and then I realized that I'm sitting on the chair where Phil sat, and he just died a week ago. And it was strange. But Phil, I think if you listen to Billy Joel, it's Billy Joel. If you listen to Barbra Streisand, it's Barbra Streisand.
Yes.
You're listening to his amazing work on Stan Getz and John Gilberto. All those Desafinado and Girl from Ipanema. That album is just it's just
this
so well engineered.
Yeah.
It's one of the best albums I've made, I think. Well, and he's like a chameleon. He changes with the artist, and you can hear his signature, but it's very, very deep and subtle. And
I find it so beautiful. As I was progressing as I have been slowly progressing in my career and learning to do some stuff, I have realized that I really like the very eclectical combination that a great music producer needs to have forcibly, because it comes from, you need to know from wood, from types of wood to the most advanced computer processes nowadays. I mean, and in the middle of that, you need to have a very, very high sensitivity. So I was listening to some commentaries on the Bible, because I've been studying this recently just for fun, and I was hearing what a shepherd used to be. Like we nowadays see a shepherd as like this guy who is just like, I don't know, maybe has a dog, and it's the dog is running around, but I mean a shepherd back then, like Moses or some stuff like that, it used to be a guy who could fight a fucking lion, like and I mean, because things were not so smooth, so I really like that this I don't think and this will bring us, I think, to a fascinating point in the conversation. I am absolutely not terrified about the technological evolution of music, because there is no way that you are going to replace this kind of shepherd that you need to guide the process. Oh yeah. And there's no synth, no computer program, no, in my opinion, no digital process that will ever erase that. Not only that need, but that need for the record to be made, but that need for society. This is a person who occupies a role in the world. I mean, these are very. And I think I brought the metaphor of the shepherd on purpose, because these are because they move the sheep, right? No, I'm joking. No, I mean, but you get it. I mean, and I think it's like an ancient shepherd, because you also have to fight with the lion of the ego of the artist. I haven't had. I mean, in my career, it hasn't produced.
You have to predict weather.
Yeah, you have to predict the weather. You have to be able to look into advanced, like so many things. So I'm really excited about that. And that's one of the things that when I see the eventual automation of jobs and things like that, and I say, well, music produces me so much anxiety, but that's not something I have to worry about. Automation taking away my job.
Well, automation is automation. I mean. The Pro Tools automation and the Control automation are really musical instruments.
Yes.
You make it more human by writing faders. Yeah. Actually, it's not computerized.
It's so amazing what you're saying, that people it's actually the opposite. People want to humanize.
Well, people want to automate something and fire everyone. Yeah, I know, but basically first of all, I'm a bit not. I do not agree with this term artificial intelligence.
Me neither, at all. Carry on.
Because it's not an artificial intelligence.
Absolutely
in a philosophical way. It's just a new type of software, and that's it.
And I'm even more brutal. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm even more brutal. I call it a gigantic Excel table. That's all it is. It's just a gigantic Excel table.
There are new things that you can make with it, but as a human, you have to program it and evaluate what it does. And it's this judgment. I mean, these automatic mastering things. People they just when I sing this, I just remember mastering with Ted Jensen or Bob Ludwig, and seeing how they react to what they hear on the source. And I didn't look what knobs they turned. Of course, didn't want that. I just listened what comes out of the speakers, and you just can't imagine. It's like poetry. He writes a new poem. It's like he writes a new piece of music. It's a creative thing. You can't really replace it with. It doesn't matter how big is the computer. It doesn't have human judgment. It doesn't have evaluation. It doesn't have imagination. So,
I have a very small question, very point to the point. Mm-hmm. What would you advise to somebody who is kind of doesn't have a budget to go to a studio, and this person has to decide either I'm gonna mix myself or I'm gonna send my mix. I mean, I'm gonna. Let me put the question clearly. I'm gonna either pay for somebody to mix or I'm gonna mix it myself and send it to an engineer for mastering. You know, these people make this sometimes a small investment for mastering. Or do you think it's not worth even doing that when you're mixing your own, like you're a guy in your home and?
Well, there's no rule, If it sounds great, it's great. I mean, not all great records are made in the top studios.
Yes.
Not all of them. So. It's not like a closed club, so everyone is open to make it. But it's hard to tell if the mix is good. If the mix is really good, you can just master it, and that's it. And I remember mastering an album for a guy called Mita from Kazan. Mm-hmm. He's quite famous now, and he's a really good musician and very creative. They did a project, he mixed himself, and he sent me all the stems. Although I thought the mixes were fine, and I don't really need stems, but it felt like safer for him, so whatever. Yeah. I didn't EQ stems. I hate it. I probably notched down guitar stem in one track, 0.5 dB. That's it. I mean... Probably I took some stereo width out of something, but overall I just mastered it as if it's a stereo file, and it was really good. And it's one of the songs was used in a Netflix.
Oh, great! Yeah,
film. Yeah. It's a very, very nice album. I mastered it at Mosfilm. It's a really good studio.
Yes.
So
yes, perhaps.
I try to what.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the budget is small and I can master at home or in my small studio when it allows to hire, for example, Mosfilm studios. It's a really good room, well tuned, with really good, accurate speakers. So and they have very high quality outboard equipment, and you can make these mastering small adjustments that just sum up into. The record sounds like one thing, like one film. You remember it as something.
Yes.
It doesn't fall apart into parts of instruments or sounds. It's just, and hopefully the listener's brain will hear something, a song, not like a cluttered sounds that just stand in the way of each other. And people who don't have budget, it's if you don't have a budget, just learn to mix yourself.
Yeah.
And try to get a budget at the same time. And when you get it, you'll know probably what to tell to the mixer. So with my band, for example, I don't like to mix my songs. So it's just I feel like I did everything when I wrote the song and when I recorded it. So it's already I already like it, and I need to hear a pre-ready product before I send it to the mixing engineer, and then I get an unexpectedly good result I wouldn't imagine. It's that's the best scenario, I think. That's how we worked with Stephen Hague, for example.
Are you a demanding client or a kind of like collaborative client, if you know what I mean?
Oh, I'm collaborative.
Yeah, that's
always,
the same.
you know.
The same.
And I don't like same thing with this messengers like Facebook, Telegram, everything. I hate when the musicians drop just one by one.
All
10,
the expectations.
15 comments for the mix right when they hear it, and I mean it's probably not that bad, but keeping track of all those little it's just you may be mixing something else or you're doing something else and you get these messages popping up. I recently got an email from a band called the Bitter Faces. It's a blues band, and we're doing a second album now. Really good. They play really good, and we spent half a day before the session in the evening to set up. So we came in the morning, started playing.
That's the best.
That's just the best thing, yeah. And they just sent me a Word file with all the notes for all the songs. They can spend 2 weeks, listened, thought, okay, this is okay, this is not okay. You change your mind from day to day sometimes, and you have to wait for a while. Yeah, and they just sent me this, and I look at it, and it's not like, wow, it's a never-ending flood of comments, but a very, very focused thing. It's really I appreciate that, yeah. And that's what I try to do with. We just finished an album with an artist that was a big production, and we recorded it in Georgia in mountains. The studio was facing the Caucasus. You know, it's beautiful. We recorded it in 3 periods of 10 days each, 2 months apart. So, like 4 songs, then 4 more songs and adjustments to those songs, and the third one in November. And it was the best because we didn't burn out with the process. If it was 1 month
amazing. Yeah.
together, you know. Also, we had some time. We lived with the songs, had new ideas. The artist wrote new songs, you know, and it was very natural process. And we mixed everything right after we finished with the legs. So, like first 4 songs we recorded, and Tim Palmer mixed all 4.
That's great.
And then sent us. And I was there was a lot of discussions and tensions during the process, of course. But I tried to keep this flood like a beaver dam, you know. It's like keep this flood of ideas and comments, and just wait a few days and then write exact notes, what we want and what we like and what we want. And so his record sessions were not like because he's a very busy producer, and you know, I wouldn't want to bother him with just one thing. It's impossible to do.
Yeah.
So we tried to focus our ideas when we asked for changes. So it wasn't forever. It was okay. Same with mastering. Yeah. And we mastered one song right before we went to the second part of the recording session. So, you know, the idea is you didn't spend most of the budget yet, but you already hear 4 mixes and 1 mastering.
That's so important.
And you can judge your not what keep in your head, because when you keep something in your head for months, it's not. It's like it's changing all the time. There.
I want to get your opinion on this. I usually, for example, when I'm doing a full record, I kind of approach to this in the same way as I approach to fixing my house. I mean, when I have a mess in my house, it's like you have 2 options there. You either work in one room forever, and then you get this room ready, and then you go into the next room, or you kind of walk around and you know, start averaging out. And I have find very positive to make a first montage of things for people to hear the whole record together instead of. I don't like this. What do you think? I mean, do you also find this approach useful?
When working on an album, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because also, like when at the end of the second session, I insisted, let's start making track sequence. what song is the first, second.
Yes.
And we made
yes,
like a demo mastering session. And when you listen to the album, and when you listen to the whole album,
absolutely,
you start understanding new things about it. And I mean, after that, 2 new songs were written, and they were really good. And it's just because we just released those expectations and thoughts about what will happen. Just make it happen and listen. It's simple. With some artists it works. With some artists it doesn't work. I mean, you have to be you have to change from project to project and meet the requirements because people have different tastes, different workflow, understanding, different passion, different time perception. Some people can plan a year ahead. Some people can't plan a week ahead.
Tomorrow,
They just tomorrow. What about tomorrow? Hey, I have a couple hours. I'm in the studio. It's like that, and it's not a bad thing. I mean, we're all different, but when there is a possibility to make some forecasts, plans, and I mean, the main thing is I hate it, when you hear a mess of tracks and the guy wants to send it to expensive mastering engineer all at once, and it's like it's non-refundable. So
exactly,
it's a very neurotic decision.
This brings me to another question about the philosophy of mastering, kind of thing. Do you see that part of the process of mastering is to make an album coherent, or do you find it cool that songs are different between themselves in a whole record?
It's a great question, and I think it's a bit more tricky. The album is coherent when the songs are different.
That's an unexpected.
Because you have one voice of a singer in every song, or maybe 2. Okay, in the band, right? You have the signature style of the drummer, of the guitarist, but the songs are different, the lyrics are different, the vibes are different, the tempos, everything, the keys. So the main idea of mastering is not to make the same Polish frequency curve and everything. It's the opposite to good mastering. Good mastering is like unwrapping the potential of every song on its own. So when you sequence them, it becomes an album, and
that's amazing.
That's what I think, and I really hate when all songs are same loudness on the album. It's terribly wrong, because if you listen to classic albums, song levels are different. You just don't mention it because you're listening to music, and that's what Tim Young told me at Metropolis, and same with Bob does. And you listen, for example, Massive Attack Mezzanine, which is a great album.
Yes.
Tim Young mastered it. It's very distorted. It's very saturated. It's very aggressive. And the first song is loud. The second is loud, and the third, Teardrop, is even loud. It's just although it's a mellow song with beautiful voice of Liz Fraser, but levels and distortion. It's not just like one shallow, how to say it, cause and effect thing. Like it's a ballad. It shouldn't be distorted. It's a loud song. It should be. It's too primitive.
But it takes a lot of character to be able to make decisions like that. Because when you're starting, you want to fit the templates and the checkpoints.
I understand it. Yeah. Well, that's not every engineer can afford that luxury of making decisions on mastering. Some engineers, some are very conservative. Like Bob Katz, he's a great engineer. And he's very conservative. Yeah. He's very accurate with music, and it's fantastic. And those styles and genres that he does, like acoustic singer-songwriter, jazz, and it's the perfect fit. But Tim Young, for example, I heard a lot of things from mixing engineers in the game. And I don't like Tim Young. He's ruining everything. He's making it loud. He's making it distorted. And I thought, wow, that's very interesting, because team actually made so many iconic records that are deliberately distorted and saturated, like, Clash London Calling or Sex Pistols Nevermind the Bollocks. If you don't distort them enough, it's not Sex Pistols.
That's not that record, yeah.
Right. And same with the Smiths, same with Manic Street Preachers, Elbow, Placebo, everything he did. One of my favorite albums is New Order, Get Ready. And there's 2001, and there's hard clipping on the CD. There are red lights, not true picks, but sample picks.
I remember fighting. I remember fighting now. I really like Tool. It's one of my favorite bands. I grew up with it, and I remember fighting on online forums, as most Tool fans do, about the fact. People were complaining about the master and about the noise distortion. That how it can be that they work 13 years on a record and they don't realize that this is happening. And I'm like, no, man, you don't get it. You don't get it. This is absolutely a part of the art, and that's how it's delivered. And I don't understand why people have this expectation of things being so clean and transparent all the time.
Well, I don't know. Well, when I was listening to Justice for All by Metallica on a cassette as a young teenager, like 12 years old, navigating through Moscow, walking to school, to musical school, I wanted it loud and distorted and everything. It's that aggressive mid-range album. People complain the bass is too low. Well, it's a good idea. It was a good idea to make it low, because when they make it loud, it's not that album anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not about hearing all the instruments. It's about getting the vibe.
Exactly.
So, what they did with Jason personally is terrible, but that decision on the bass, I think it was right.
Yeah.
And when Death Magnetic came out, and those people like of my age and older, they already got a BMW. They're listening to Jazz FM, and then my good old Metallica releases an album. They put it and it's distorted. Yeah, it is. Come on, it's Metallica. Yes. It's supposed to be distorted, exactly. and that all that thing with loudness was. I think it doesn't really. There are loudness wars, but sometimes it's part of the art, and I don't think this UFS thing. It shows absolutely nothing, because I checked with students. We had many records from many years, like loaded into Pro Tools, and you hear like Green Day and it's -6.
Yes.
And then you hear like something like Blink-182. It's same loudness. It's -9. And then I opened the track we did in London with Tim Young, and it was direct vinyl session. So the purest and cleanest chain. And we just recorded a digital copy into Sadie, and he mastered that, and that version is on iTunes. But the real deal is the vinyl, because it was cut just mechanically from the mixing console to the mastering console. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I look at that track, and it's I was really happy to see. It sounds louder than Green Day and it's -11, and it's not normalized. So it's just the ratio between the musical information and unwanted something that you undeliberately carry from the room, from the circuits, from the instruments, all the sub that you don't hear from the speakers, but it's still there, and it drives the cone, and it makes it less loud. And it's all those things. So the ratio was. I remember there was some noise at -60. I think we had probably 12 synthesizers and drum machines, and I had a 16-channel Neve mixer and API 312 inputs. So only level and panning. That was our idea. So if you want to change the sound, change it on the synth.
Exactly.
And it was, it was a great session. And I remember this. I hear noise, and it's like -60 dB, and I think, wow, it's too loud. Or -60, -70, a bit noise, and Tim says, no, it's not too loud. Because all the mixes you hear in your normal life are so muddy. Yes. All that noise is covered, but here it's still transparent and open. That of course, you through the music hear that noise a bit, but forget it, it's not a problem.
How do you feel about, this is a super technical question, how do you feel about summing mixers versus inside the box mixing? Like, do you find the value? I own a Neve 5060, and I personally, I just love that feeling, you know, but have you experimented with summing mixers, and do you like them, or how?
Yeah, I did, but I think it's just as long as in the box summing appeared, we got an option.
Yeah,
everyone got an option. So now we're thinking whether it's in the box or analog or hybrid. I mean, it all depends on the workflow of the engineer. It all depends on the recalls, on many things, you know.
yeah,
and
that's the best answer possible.
Sometimes it probably you can saturate in the box what you want and make more rides in automation to make it sound more analog. But still, you have this possibility to come back within 2 months and open it again and change something. Because recalls are now just, it's a must. You have to be flexible and
absolutely
return all the settings anytime.
That's something that people who have never worked in a true analog environment do not and also especially people who are entering to the field of music production, they don't understand the time factor really well, because they have never had the pressure of somebody paying you for doing something. So everything sounds very romantic and stuff until you have a 1 hour recall for a 3 hour session, mixing session. So it's like, I mean, you need to, as you said, you need to be able to balance it, to balance things out, and just to be able to use the resources properly. I mean, that's it. I'm kind of like taking us towards the analog versus digital conversation, which is, in my point, is a futile conversation, because I mean, there is no necessity even to have it, and I want to have that conversation to see if we can both reach the same conclusion, which is that we are always going to live in a hybrid world, because people forget about something so important when they're thinking about music production, that humans like to have fun. Humans like humans like to touch something, to grab things. We are not only things that. So where do you stand on that?
Well, I always answer that this question has no general answer, but each situation has an answer. So, I mean, are we recording this to tape or to Pro Tools, for example? Yes, but I mean, do you want a mic emulation, or you want a mic pre-emulation, or you want a mic pre? Because mic pre-emulation 10 years ago when I started was a joke. Now it's a real thing that really works sometimes. And I mean, you can always answer this question to yourself in each situation based on time, budget constraints, and sonic changes. So anyway, we're listening to analog. After D to A, the speaker cone, you know, it's analog.
And also,
so it's never 100% digital, even though most of the job might be in the box. You still have microphones, and then you have loudspeakers that play back. So, and I think that way. Also about analog summing, some projects, you know, once I did that band you mentioned, that Black Delta movement from Hull in UK. They were in Moscow for a couple of gigs, and the club owner Nash introduced them to me. We just had beers, and I said, "Oh, what if tomorrow morning let's record something?" And they said, "Oh, we got a new song." And we just got to the studio, and 4 hours we recorded all live with headphones. Very aggressive. They're really cool live. And when I started mixing, I mixed in the box, and I did 4 versions, I think. And they said, "Yeah, we'll like it." And I thought, no, just the energy is not that. And I said, okay, I'm changing the concept. So I took, there was an SSL 900 console there. So I took 2 tracks each time. I was layering like it's mono tape, like Jeff Emerick, you know.
Yes.
I took I just jotted down. Okay, left is tom 1, left guitar, left overhead, center bass, kick, snare, vocal, right.
Oh, that's great.
Second guitar, second tom, second overhead, and then I just summed kick with the snare, then the sum
That's
of kick
amazing,
of the snare with the bass, and writing all the time. Not writing automation, but writing in real time and printing. And then that thing with the vocal, then the left channel, then LCR, and I balanced it. Every time I layered a little bit of tape delay and a little bit of spring reverb, and EQ'd and compressed every
amazing.
layer. And it's like a LCR mix. And when I sent that, they said, wow, and I thought myself, yeah, it sounds powerful, it sounds like them live. And Mike Marsh, great mastering engineer, who they sent it to him.
Yeah.
He's in Southern England, I think now, in Sussex, but he used to work at the Exchange in London for many years. Well, he just ripped me. It's incredible. The stereo width is so big, but you didn't spoil the center, because when I get mixes with that width, the center is muffled usually.
Yeah, I have that problem a lot, and I haven't considered what you did. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just said that it was like layering. It was a LCR mix, like vintage style thing. And eventually, it was the first track I produced that was on BBC Six. So
great, congratulations!
Yeah.
Have you found yourself using this LCR for people who don't know what we're talking about? This left, center, right. I mean, it's just basically.
Yeah. It's
have you found yourself using this technique a lot?
Well, I use it to some extent, and I recently really liked. You know what? I really liked saturation in mid-side on the tubas.
Yes.
Because I don't like stereo saturation. It just it creates something weird and very muddy and slow. You know, it's just you lose that center and punch in the mix. So I do put some mid-side matrix, then different mono saturators on center and sides, and then back to left and right, and I can even automate that. And so it's just a nice thing. It's one of the beauties of vinyl, really, because vinyl is mid-side, and all the distortion that happens on the cutting stylus and then on the playback is in mid-side. So the center is always focused. Even with tape, you don't get that center image that you get with the vinyl.
That's amazing.
Because it's lateral and vertical, right? It's like mono is left and right, and the stereo difference is up and down. Mm-hmm. And you get this encoded into left and right on cartridge, because there are two magnets are like 90 degrees, you know, and this picks these movements and this picks these movements.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful technology. I think it was invented by Alan Blumlein.
Yeah, man, that's a genius. Yeah. I always say Alan Blumlein, and well, for me, my personal hero is Jean-Baptiste Fourier. I mean, I have in my background of my computer, I have a photo of Jean-Baptiste Fourier with the glasses of like a boss, you know. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, for people who don't know who am I talking about, I'm talking about the person who understood that waveforms can be broken down into simple components. So this applies both to light and both to sound. And so basically every single technology we have now is based on the mathematics.
It's based on his invention. Yeah.
He is the granddaddy of our world. And this is going to bring me to a question that came to my mind a second ago. You know, for example, when you read the Constitution of the United States or the Bible, these texts that are like constitutional, you know, big, they say they speak about the past being built on the shoulders of giants, you know, and but we have gone through such a technological journey, you know, and things have changed so much. Do you think that the past engineers and producers and in the recent past, I mean, last 40 years, set the foundation for something, or the present engineer can look to the past engineer? Because I think this happens a lot and said, you know nothing. You know what I mean?
Well, you know, it's incredible how much we can learn from those guys.
Exactly.
And my one thing I really want to share, and I told about this several times, I think, but no problem, is the recent remix of Abbey Road.
Mm-hmm.
Have you listened to it? It's 2019 Abbey Road by the Beatles, remixed.
No, I haven't heard it. No.
Oh, you gotta check that out. You just mentioned how much very speed detuning is there on the original, and it's not because the tape machine is wrong. It's not. It's deliberate. It's artistic, and it's like pitch, time, and balance and EQ are like one thing. You know, it's amazing what Jeff Emerick and George Martin did on that album, and it's the first album on a solid-state desk. You know, because previous albums are made on tube equipment, but Abbey Road is recorded on the EMI TG console, the famous TG console, and they didn't use it for drums and vocals. They still used the V76 preamps and tube circuits, because Jeff, just after tests, he said, I'm sorry, I won't repeat that drum sound on solid state equipment. It won't sound like that. So we have to use some of that and some of this. And when they developed the console, there was some of the like auxiliary rooms at Abbey Road, and they duplicated all the paths. So while they recorded music, another engineer was recording a second copy on a solid-state console, so they could compare and fine-tune the design. So it was like half a year of research. That's why that's TG. It's like this plugin from Waves is amazing, you know, this TG plugin. Yes. But the console itself is just and all that stuff together, you know, and all the detuning and very speeding that Jeff did. You just hear that those are very subtle things, and they're meant to be subtle because they're too obvious. They just kick you out of the song. They shouldn't be very, very obvious. Not that you want to hide the trick, but the thing is, you don't want to distract from the singer or from the guitarist playing his part. And that's one thing. Another thing about past engineers, I mean, I would say that the book I read by Hermann von Helmholtz, The Sensations of the Tone.
Another big cat, yeah.
Yeah, it's just an eye opener, because it was before electricity. I mean, before recording, and it just sums up anatomy and physiology of hearing with music theory and acoustics and physics all together. You know, the fact that the guy had all these different subgenres of science in one head and could write such a simple and focused book. It's just ridiculous.
Seems like the first Pro Tools rig ever.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and that book is like, you know, there are so many I would say myths and legends about sound running around engineers. Yes. People tell it to each other, and sometimes you can't critically think whether it's right or wrong. And sometimes you take it for granted, and it's hard to filter all that stuff. Yeah. Some books, some advices, but that book is just a healing.
But I think you're right that it's hard to filter, but it's important to adopt a disposition in which we don't have this modernity bias towards the past. You know, that I think generates a lot of the problems that we have in the present. It's like you know, we know better. You know, no, we always knew better. You know, until the current time where we were. Yeah.
Well, people don't know that vocals being tuned for like 60 years. They think that it started with auto-tune in 2001, which is not. It was always being tuned. And since like 81, it was tuned digitally with in-tight harmonizer or AMS, DMX, or other equipment, Lexicon, Time Stretcher. And when they listen to records like Nirvana, they wouldn't say the vocal is tuned, but it is tuned.
It is tuned. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I
So,
want to share with you something that I think is super important. It came to me from Fab Dupont. I was checking out the Pure Mix, and he said something that absolutely blew my mind, because I always wanted to understand why we make perfect records. I mean, perfect. I'm not talking about why we go into such a length, you know, to make a record. And he said something that blew my mind, man. This is the idea. When you go to a show and you look at a band, perhaps you heard this already, I don't know. When you look to a show and you look at a band performing, you're in a venue and there are 2,000 people, and your girlfriend is holding, or your wife is holding your hand, and you have a beer in your hand, and then you gave her a kiss while the song was playing, and you had a sip of beer, and you looked around you, and there was this euphoria, and you feel, man, my skin is getting in chicken right now, I promise you.
Oh, wow.
and you feel so much, right? If I would play to you a recording of that show, most likely the performance was shit. I mean, or not ideal, and it will never produce the feeling that you had in that moment, because the feeling is a composite of the fact that your favorite artist was in the room and that you were
sure.
And so a record needs to be crafted to such perfection because you want to be able to recreate that same feeling on every play. Bam, you know.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's a great idea. I can add a thought that what I always tell to musicians, and it's a very hard way with artists who make not much recordings in the studio and play a lot of shows with a huge concert experience, that it's not really, you know, when the live show is over, when it's going on, when I'm in front of house, for example, I work with Vadim Eilenkrig, the great trumpet player, great musician, for 2.5 years. And when you're front house riding the show, you have to be there 100% of the time with your brain and ears and clear mind, because you have to be open to potential problems that can evolve unexpectedly, you know, and it's a show. So that kind of thing. And when it's over, doesn't matter anymore. That's it. It's over. It's gone. You get a beer. You like chat with musicians. It's always like a stress and relief thing after the concert, you know. But it doesn't matter how it sounded anymore. But in the studio, it's the opposite. The most interesting things will happen to a record after you stop recording. So true. After you stop
because people will make love listening to that record, for example. That's such an interesting thing that will happen to that record, for example. It's more interesting than the studio.
So it's not matter much the emotional vibe in the studio in the moment, but you have to think it matters for performance and for creativity. But I mean, people will not know that vibe unless you translate it through music.
Yes. And
you have to, it's a different room. Why do we have this good acoustics in studios? Because why we're not recording, well, some people record just in regular rooms, because there will be another room on top of your room on the playback. And all those rooms are just random all over the planet. You can't predict room modes in all the homes, you know. It's impossible. So you have to make a very, I wouldn't say clean, but like perfect, as you said, like very, very focused record that delivers the most important part of the sound through most of the speakers first, and then details second, and that's why we need good mastering.
And also, it needs to be full of those bubbles. You know, like our beer, the beer that you're drinking has those bubbles that, you know, when you get it close to your mouth, you feel a little bit of the freshness of the beer. You know, the record needs to have this effervescence, you know.
I'll go and grab a beer after the show. Yeah, after the show. Yeah, no.
Yeah, as you want. Yeah, like, I mean, the whole thing is just. I mean, it's not just about the acoustic perfection. It's about the soul that is put into it, and nothing of this is trivial. Like, and that's the magic that happens in the studio. And this is taking us slowly to another topic that I want to cover, which is psychology, because I became super interested in. I mean, I was actually my life changed after I arrived to Carl Jung, because everybody that I admired was kind of like Carl Jung, and then I landed on him, and I don't want to go into the details. The fact is that I started thinking about psychology a lot, and whenever I speak with people about mixing or production nowadays, I start speaking about psychology, because I personally realized that my main technical problems came from the psychological side, because I was letting my mind drive me to make too many steps, unnecessary steps, because I had the necessity to impress my clients, because I had the necessity to show myself as an authority, and these were problems that were coming. You see, on my knowledge on how to make a record, they were coming on the control of my own self. Do you find, well, this is an obvious question. I mean, it's obvious that psychology is a determinant factor in making a record. How do you kind of handle the room? I mean, when you meet the musicians and you start preparing the whole thing, can you share with me some thoughts that have come to your mind about this?
One of my favorite things is clear space.
Mm-hmm.
The concept of something not occupied yet, 3 channels in the console, 3 mics, free equipment,
excellent. Ready to go. Yeah, but free.
I don't want to, to occupy everything from the start, because there should be some room for further ideas, further experiments. Yeah. That's important. Second, if it's a big band session, it's a terrible situation when the manager sends the same SMS to everyone 10 a.m. in the studio. The session is destroyed.
That's so stupid. Yeah.
That's because you need a piano tuner first. Then you need the piano player to quality check the tuning, if he's comfortable. Then the bass and guitars, and if it's like they can come and you adjust the scale of the guitar to the piano. So it's like it's not just green lights from the tuner.
And the vocalist is sitting there like,
Yeah, the trumpet player has to play before and when he is warming up, the room is occupied by him. Yeah. You can't do anything else there. And then the drummer has to set up the kit. And, just managing first 2 hours of setup so people arrive and smoothly do what they want to do before they start playing it's a very important art of just setting up the session. Because later on, you just focused on music and you cut the songs, and it goes like this.
Yeah.
Because if the piano is not tuned, or the scale of the guitar is just randomly tuned by some some tech guy somewhere, and the actual piano is out of tune with this guitar. So the intervals are different. It doesn't sound like harmony, and sounds very boring.
Doesn't sit together.
It sounds boring. You don't get this impression you had in your head when you compose the track, but you don't hear it on the record. And what's the point? So that's it.
Is there something more in your psychology that you found that it's not necessarily about doing wrong, but it was a good insight?
Psychology, I think what you said when you first started, when I first started, I gave too much credit to things that occupied my time and attention, but didn't matter in that particular situation for that record. It was more like, like a ritual. So you're doing the right thing. And as a young engineer, you're more confident. But it's not absolutely not needed for this album or this artist or this record, and it's just because there are way too many things to do. It will take forever. You can make mic shootout, you can tune drums, you can change drum kits, you can you can pick the right preamp for the right source. Because they do color sounds.
Of course.
It's true, but
of course.
But if all of them are Neve or all of them are SSL or API or Trident or whatever, it doesn't matter. Studios survived for decades with one type of preamp on all records: reggae, hard rock, pop, jazz, everything. This studio has this console. That's it, and that's how those great records were made. And now we have this variety and this Lego, so we can play with it, but not when the artist is in the room.
I am personally very aggressive. I mean, very. I don't have to call it punk or aggressive. I mean, it's like I don't like to deliberate when I don't have to deliberate, as you're saying, and it's just like, man, this is gonna sound great. Let's just go. Let's go. Play. Play music because this is not about. The experiments are done before, and there is a aha moment that you obtained in a point of your life, and then you apply it to a certain situation. But I remember a famous quote from Steve Albini, which is that the best records are recorded outside of the studio, meaning that, I mean, you land into the studio and you just sit down and do it already there. I mean, you don't sit down to think so much about things. But I do have a question about this. Perhaps it's a mistake. I was recurrently. By the way, I want to give you a mega official strange news, but we are closing 2 of our studios out of the 3 we had as of yesterday.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh. Wow.
Yes. Yeah, it's fine. I mean, it had something that had to happen in a point, and yesterday I signed the contract to cancel. I mean, I saw my studio like, okay, bye. Like, I mean, the studio that I built with my own hands, with my friends, Studio B. We're gonna keep Studio A. But I mean, I'm kind of okay with this. It's hard, but I'm doing it preemptively. I don't expect the market to come back to the same place.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And this was something that was going to happen in 2 years. The way I see, in my opinion, I mean, the way I see DTH, DTH is a beautiful force, and it will continue. But the way I see DTH is like a teenager girlfriend that you had, and it was that love real? Yes, it's real love. But there is always an eventuality when you're gonna move on. And this is kind of like I don't know how to call it when you say breaking news that this is gonna happen.
Well, I got it. Well. Good luck with your future projects. And I mean, I think I take personally very, very easy myself. Is I moved also from my room now. I just didn't prolong the rental, and it becomes a per hour room at Ilya Mazaev studio again. So we can always book it. But when I read the memoir of Phil Ramone, the A&R Studios, when they made Paul Simon, Still Crazy After All These Years, then Blood on the Tracks by Bob Dylan, then Paul McCartney Rem, Atlantic Crossing by Rod Stewart, all the Billy Joel albums, well, loads of them. It was located in 3 different places over the years. Who would know?
Yeah, I didn't know.
Oh, the owner of the building sells the building. Okay, we're finding a new room.
Exactly.
52nd Street. And that's why the album by Billy Joel is named 52nd Street. It's where the studio is located. Yeah, so after that, and he writes it so, like, with such an easiness, It's like, I mean, for American mentality, it's easier.
Yeah,
They're migrating between cities and states all their life.
Yeah,
they're very, very... Europe is not like that, and Russia is not like that, and Latin America, I think, is not like that.
No, it's not like that.
Either you just leave for London, or if you're in the periphery, you leave for Caracas, to study, to get a job and something like that. But in America, it's all the way. For me, it was very, very strange to see that Ted Jensen, legendary mastering engineer who lived all his life in New York. I was in his room in Chelsea Market, and he had a Statue of Liberty in the wind. Very far away, but it was there. And those beautiful Bowles and Wilkins Nautilus speakers sounded amazing. And they kind of stopped that business because it was a 20-year lease. And in these 20 years, Chelsea District and Meatpacking District, from hipster abandoned stuff, became a very, very high-priced real estate location. It changed a lot, and it's like it used to be like like Art Play, like Karma, but now it's it's a full blowing business center and stuff, and the High Line, all this stuff changed. So the owner of the building couldn't really prolong on the same terms. Yeah. So they bought two buildings. One of them they built from scratch. They just bought land and built the studio in Nashville from scratch, and he's in Nashville now.
I told to Ilya, to my partner, when I called him, because I was the one who initiated this process of closing two of our three studios. I told him this. You know what I used to love a lot? Caracas. And you know what I used to love a lot? London. And I don't live there anymore. And one has to be ready just to move on. I feel this is like a super Darwinian time in which anything that is weak is going to fall catastrophically. That's how I feel. Maybe I'm overreacting, but that's how
Probably. Well, who knows? But yeah, it's also about risks. It's like, if you feel like, I don't know. Well, I've seen just a month ago, I went to State of the Art Studios in London. Do you know it?
No, I don't.
SOTA, State of the Art.
Yeah.
They shut down a month ago and sold everything.
We were discussing this on Facebook, I think. Yeah, I remember. Or no, it was another one. Anyways, carry on.
It was another one. It was another one. And this one is, it's very. Another one was the church, I think. No?
Yeah.
Well, not the church. Yeah, but this one is. It had a beautiful EMI TG console, and they sold that to France, and they still have some mics available, but it's like a perfect condition U67 for £12,000. So it's like not. I don't know what to do with this information that it's available. It's available, but somebody might buy it, and.
So they closed?
They closed. They shut the studio. They sold the piano. They sold everything. And
it's happening because of COVID, or no? It's happening now, or
it's happening now. And I think they were weak already by the start of the problem. So they didn't have much airbag. They were on the brink already. So the thing is that studio, Stephen Hay told me it's one of the best tracking rooms in London, and he said that I don't really need much in my small studio because I always go to Real World, to Peter, or to State of the Art. Both rooms are perfect, and also Chris Kimsey, who is a very famous producer. I'm happy to say I met him early in my career. I didn't even start, and then we worked a little together, and he's great. He's very, very vibe-oriented producer, and he creates real rock and roll. All those Stones albums, like Some Girls, Steel Wheels, Sticky Fingers. It's all his mixes, and recording. And he just, we were sending a project to him, and he said, I'll book this room at State of the Art. And he said a fantastic mix on that TG console with soundboard, Manly and stuff, and it sounds amazing. So it was a bit sad to see it, but again, this console goes to Paris, so some studio opens there. So never. That's why I had many times people approached me, let's build a studio, and I never felt like I'm ready to build a commercial studio. I can build my workplace for my small tasks like mixing, mastering, overdubbing, pre-production.
Yes.
But to build a full-blown studio with per-hour rentals, maintenance, equipment, everything, and I mean, we have already like Muslim studios, Igor Matvienko studios.
Yes.
And I mean, the price of that construction, you can do several albums for that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's kind of the rationale behind our closure. Think. Yeah, that's kind of the rationale behind our closure. To have a studio has been a wonderful experience. I loved it. I really loved it.
Well, it's amazing.
Yeah. I don't agree. Some people say that I remember when I was a child, my father always wanted to buy a boat, and many people were advising us against buying a boat. They were saying, to own a boat, you're only happy the day you buy it and the day you sell it. They say this, you know.
Yeah, it's an old saying, I know.
And I don't like this kind of mentality. It's like, it is obvious that it's going to be a hassle, and it is obvious that it's going to be expensive. I mean, and you do it, if you don't know it when you're doing, before you get into it, you're stupid. I mean, it's just how it is. And I always said that it always felt every single day of that studio. I mean, by the way, DTH is not closing. It's just like we're shrinking our operation. Like
Right.
And
so
condensing.
you just...
but every day of that operation, it felt like a Breaking Bad episode kind of thing, you know, like you you had a shotgun, you know, you had to go and deal with some bad guys, like always, and we had that story. It's worth a book. I mean, it's been a fascinating story, and I'm really happy that, I mean, I was calling for this shrinkage a long time ago because even before the I mean, I was telling to my partners, like, guys, let's be realistic, you know. And then when this happened, before we open, we're going to open just smaller, and that's it. Like, yeah,
that's a good idea.
Yeah.
That's a sane idea, I think. Well, what do I want to say?
I had a question. If you remember, I had a question before I went to this segue of DTH. The question was the following: when you, because you mentioned mic shootouts, right? And I really, I tend to do. I just want to know, do you mic shoot out the same room many times, or do you find sweet spots and then you apply it to them, or do you believe that, not believe, I mean, or have you proven to yourself that the instrument and the position will always create a different? I think I'm saying this question in a very complicated way. You have one drum kit A, and you mic shoot it in your room, and you find a good spot that you like. Do you repeat this mic shootout every time you record somebody else? If you have the time, of course. Or do you go to your sweet spot again? You see where I'm going? Is your mic shootout a usual part of your day-to-day routine?
I tend to think that as long as acoustically the sound is good and the room is ready to handle the low end that the kit produces, you can be more or less accurate with placing mics, but all the sounds will be good.
Yeah,
more or less, you know. And I sometimes when we recorded this album in Georgia, it was, by the way, it was fantastic. You know, I'll show the album to you soon.
I would love
it's
to hear
yet to be released.
Yeah,
I'm sure you'll have fun listening to it. We had 8 channels.
Excellent.
And it's a Dryas Scarlett USB card. And we had 2 Neve 1073 preamps. I got my beloved Great River NV1. It's my
amazing.
favorite.
I have it right. I'm using it right now. I mean, that's the preamp that I'm using right now. It's just so amazing. Right. Yeah,
it's my favorite transformer mic pre.
Yeah.
And also we had 4 channels of TL audio tube pre's. So that's it. And so I just thought that we would set things up and not change much, because the DIs on every preamp might be like stolen for overdubbing synthesizers anytime. But the lines were just the vocal was Neumann U147.
Yep.
With the Great River. Guitar and bass were 2 Neves, and drums were 4 channels of this tube TL audio. And I put the ribbons on the overheads, coils, and it was like you could move it to the piano, record the piano with those channels, then move it back. It was like that. I wanted to set up something simple and then not think much about disconnecting and connecting cables. But the first day we did a really cool thing, because there was a nice electrical engineer in the area, and he I think he's from something from how to say it, military radio specialist.
Okay.
Back in the days. Now he is retired, so he knows physics well, and he got his soldering iron, and he got his multimeter, and we got a bunch of resistors, and we just biased every path. I just put an iPhone with like Bruce Springsteen Born to Run played
Yes.
on repeat in the room near the mic. And we just put the resistor between the mic and the preamp to find the proper impedance reduction.
Man, that's great.
So it's like a straight path. Then we did the same between the output and the input of the A to D. And then we even bias tubes by ear. And at some point you just hear from the speaker like it's a focused camera.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, so it's like all the mud goes away. You just hear the sound and nothing else. And that clarity we just spent. The musicians were very unhappy, but I said, studio's apart. It's just built from scratch, and it's a nice place, but nothing is connected. So let's connect it the way I know. We have only 8 channels, not much time to spend. So as long as we did this, you know, just put the mic. And sometimes I would put the headphones and find a really good spot for the overheads. But that's it. I didn't really... I know this thing, you know, you move the mic towards the cone and get this brighter sound on the guitar, and you move this here. I don't really play much with that.
Yeah.
I just put just guitar, S1057.
Boom,
and you
yes.
to the
Yes.
amp, and let's play a good part.
Yes.
I don't like to mess around too much with it.
Yeah.
You know this new technology that allows you from the iPad with the driver.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, but that's crazy, you know. Sometimes you want to move the mic in an absolutely wrong place, just like that.
Yes.
And that's the sound that will drive the track.
Yes.
And with these micro adjustments, it's just...
Well, the thing is that I am 100% in the same philosophy as you. I just there is a book called I think the person who wrote it is it escapes my mind right now. The book is called Recording the Distorted Guitars from Hell. And this Sleeperman, I think is his name. I'll check it out later. And well, I mean, he kind of calls this kind of process as a controlled, as a sculpture of white noise. That's how he calls it. So I guess, but anyways, that's another topic. This leads me to one of the final things that I want to cover in this episode, which is that I'm really curious about if you have any knowledge or you can share with me some light about what's the legacy of the Soviet Union in the modern, I mean, in the recording industry in Russia. I mean, I'm really interested to hear about this. If
I would say a few things. First of all, there was sound engineering, there was recording, there was broadcasting, and this, this opinion, because these bands like bands with guitars in the 80s in Soviet Union. I'm not talking about the underground scene like Kino or Aquarium, all the underground bands, you know, although they were legal and they were like St. Petersburg Rock Laboratory, but anyway, they were quite edgy with lyrics for the time, even though it was perestroika. And that's another cultural phenomenon. But I'm talking about the official bands with...
That's what I want to talk about.
Yeah, that was really... it looked so inferior compared to the Stones or the Beatles or Boney M or ABBA, you know. And it was already well known in the Soviet Union. That's why people have this thought that our music, our recording is worse or something like that. But they forget that the symphonic orchestras... and all that stuff, and that stuff is really the stuff for London, New York, Los Angeles, Berlin, and all other major recording cities. It's not the bands with guitars. Bands with guitars, it's a cheap thing. You can record an album in a day.
Yeah.
But to hire an orchestra for rehearsal and Studio A and all the engineers and to buy all the mics for the orchestra, I'm sorry, it's the whole different thing. And those people, they're responsible for the soil. What's going on in the city with recording? I think so. And in Soviet Union, there were a lot of great engineers like Viktor Babushkin, the famous guy from Mosfilm, and he engineered a lot of movie soundtracks that sound really good. I mean, it's just really good, and there's a lot of stuff that was well done, and I mean, some of the film scores that's still being made in Mosfilm, they won prizes internationally,
Yes.
and people come from France, from Japan, from China to record soundtracks in Mosfilm. So it's a world-class studio. It's not just local indie band that just no. I mean, don't want to like insult anyone, but
Of course.
when we think about Russian sound, thinking only about bands and hip hop,
It's a mistake.
It's wrong.
Yeah,
It's
you're
a
right.
mistake, because there's a jazz, there's classical music, there's film soundtracks, there's a lot more, and that thing. No, I would highly recommend everyone to read Peter Andrew's memoir. You know,
Can you if somebody wants to find it, what they have to Google exactly to the Peter Andrews?
Peter Andre. It's called, I think, Inside the Recording Studio. And on the cover, you see Peter Andre with Herbert von Karajan, Mstislav Rostropovich, Svetoslav Richter, and David Oistrach in Abbey Road Studio A at the console. And Peter Andre was responsible for most classical recordings of EMI in the second half of 20th century. Once I read his books, I realized that Beatles were really like digging around with that knowledge that was next room, because in that next room there was the London Symphonic Orchestra, Arturo Toscanini, Leonard Bernstein, Herbert von Karajan, you know, all the great conductors, and those records were very popular. EMI did a lot of money on classical music in the 60s, and those engineers and that amount of precision and commitment, those were the same guys who set up Studio B for the Beatles and Pink Floyd. So
that's amazing.
I don't believe that would be possible if there wasn't this classical big thing in the same building.
Yeah.
So they were just
super interesting.
having fun. They were having fun, and those guys, they had unions, they had wages for each musician, scores, rehearsals, miking, no EQs, 60s, no nothing, just tape machine, you balance on the go, 2-track, 4 engineers at the console, and you have an orchestra. And it's a movie soundtrack or it's classical recording, whatever. It's a different kind of thing. Same thing with Capitol Records in Hollywood. Absolutely the same thing.
And so, standing from the Soviet Union and now projecting towards the future, how do you feel about the direction of where the music scene is going? I mean, do you have any thoughts about this? Recommendations? I don't know.
I think there's a huge improvement in this scene in Russia and in Moscow especially, because I mean, I know what happens here. There are a lot of engineers. There's this whole generation of new engineers, and people do really good records, and people go to study to Germany, to France, to London, to LA, to other cities, and this knowledge is also the potential of internet. We have much more sources of information, and it's incredible, because when I started, people were so obsessed with equipment because it was lacking. I mean, we had it in Mosfilm studios, we had it in Vintage Records, some other records, but musicians, singers wanted to buy themselves a Manley Vox box or 1176 just because they just remember that sensation in the studio, and they thought, well, if I buy this, I'll just make 10 albums every week just with this piece of gear, but not, and it kind of, I think it's saturated now. There's not so much obsession with equipment. Remember when Analog made this atomic clock, and the arms race started. Everybody wanted to get the atomic clock, and so my digital is better than other digital, and it's but it's not. I mean, like other clocks are good too, and good enough. So it's you don't need a $25,000 guitar. $1,000 is enough.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the other part is just
$500 is enough if it's a good tone and good hands. So this arms race, this competition and possessing equipment, it's of course a dead end. And now looking back 10 years ago, I think me, myself, and many other people, they didn't really know what's important and what's not. By doing so, now it's changing.
Yeah.
Now it's really changing.
Yeah, and I think that
So I hope that in Russia it will just evolve into something, because all the cities have their sound, like LA sound, Nashville sound, Chicago sound, whatever, Manchester sound. So same with Moscow, same with Yekaterinburg, same with St. Petersburg. I mean, it's. I always tell there are like three major cities: London, New York, and LA, right? And the industry is concentrated there for all the period of its existence, basically, for the last 60 years, of course. But there are other cities like Stockholm, like Chicago, Detroit,
Dublin,
others like
perhaps Paris,
Dublin, right, Paris, and others, and Moscow is somewhere there too. It's not, and for the whole former Soviet Union, CIS, right? It's the major center. Yeah. People come to Moscow to record, to study, to play shows, everything. There are a lot of great musicians living in Moscow. Working with jazz musicians, I was fascinated. I had no idea how good they are, how many of them are there. They know about each other, of course. It's their profession. But outside of that world, we just don't know. A lot of great drummers, great bass players, great trumpet players, saxophone players, piano players. You can really just being in Moscow, you can build teams for projects.
Yes, absolutely.
Very diverse, and it's just amazing. We're very happy, to have this here. And so,
as a foreigner, I have been absolutely shocked by Moscow, and in all senses. I mean, I had zero knowledge, and when I remember when I sat down in a bus in Victoria Station in London to get out of Russia, because the reason why I left, why I left London is because my wife was not allowed to move there. For the documents. I mean, I was just living there, installed, and she was not my wife back then, but so I left London, and I remember to be with her, because I knew that this was a woman of my life, and I'm happy to have made the right decision. But I remember when I was in the bus in Victoria Station, I started crying. I thought like, okay, well, I'm sure I'll be fine, but this is the end of my music career, and it was exactly the opposite. I mean, it was exactly the opposite. Yeah. I mean, I arrived here and I was shocked with a very, very dynamic market. I mean, of course, there are so many things that we can grow and improve, but that's what we're doing every day, and that's
right.
And I think there's something interesting. When I was touring with Zemfira in the USA, and we were building stages every day with the local crews, and we were describing to them what we had in Moscow from the perspective of DTH, which was this tight unity community thing. But I really think that it expands to the atmosphere of Moscow. I mean, there is a rat race a bit, but Moscow feels like more tight. I can approach to you and we just talk to you easily. Do you disagree with that?
Of course, it's a rat race. It's a huge city.
But when I was talking with the Americans, they were salivating about some things that we had here that they did not were enjoying there, and that was referring mostly to the human aspect of the whole thing. I mean, of how humane things felt, and how real and alive, at least how I was describing it to them, felt. And before I ever even met my first Russian in my whole life, I asked to a friend of mine who is from Poland. I asked her, how are Russians? And she said, very human. And absolutely right. And I think that that's our vantage point. Sorry, our point of competitive advantage. that we have as a scene is that, and I think, well, I mean, right now with the COVID-19 situation, I think there's going to be a depuration of the things that cannot stay afloat, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it's going to be a bad thing for those who are not thinking fast and ahead, for sure, but for the whole picture, it's going to be positive. So I think that I don't expect that we're going to go back.
I hope so. I hope that the clubs survive and the jazz clubs survive. And that's very important. But overall, I think it's we're all hoping for the best, and I see a lot of potential. Really, there's a lot of potential for development, and the awareness of musicians about the studio process grew a lot over the years too. Yeah, because also there's a lot of preconception in Russia. You know, it's not like United States when one guy knows how to do one type of thing, and unless you are a super cool guy, like Al Schmidt, or if you just like work, you just learn something, and there's always another guy to do the other side of the thing. In Moscow and Russia, it's very, I mean, it's more chaotic. It's not easy to understand which knowledge will you need tomorrow. Yeah. So you try to get on the go, and like touring with Mujuice, for example. Touring with Vadim Eilenkrig, it was always amazing. Great people on the stage and the rental companies. It was top, you know. Yeah. So he's a top jazz artist. But with Mujuice, it was a small club, and if you don't know how to tune the PA yourself, no one will help you. So you have to know it. At least you have to just put up Roxy Music have on and EQ it by ear, whatever, you know, because and that kind of thing that leaves us with a lot of extra knowledge a bit outside your profession, your main profession, and it's maybe easier to connect with other professionals and stuff like that.
Well, man, we just did 2 hours. As we promised that we will be. That's amazing. It flew by. By the way, this gave me an idea for the future conversation that we could have, which could be a little bit about the history, because I think you know a lot about it, and I mean just about how things were and how things are now. That would be super interesting to discuss. But anyways, I'm sure you're going to be a regular guest in this show.
Well, thanks really a lot.
Thankful, man.
Happy to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the next one will be post-quarantine with some beers without a camera, just discussing things how it should be.
Right.
Man, take super good care, and
thanks a lot.
Let's move forwards, and if there's anything we can do on our end to help you, just drop us a line. We're very happy to hear from you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Right, man.
Thanks.